Babe of the day. Babe of the day. Elvira. I could say this video is about her actress, Cassandra Peterson, but truthfully, it's going to focus more on her famous character. You see, Elvira is such a popular character that she is almost a separate entity of Cassandra Peterson. She did such a good job playing her that Elvira is like a real person. I grew up watching Elvira on TV, commercials, and of course, her first feature film. She was quite a phenomenon, and Elvira was by far and away a bigger celebrity than Cassandra Peterson. A lot of people back in the 1980s weren't even aware of her real name, but they liked Elvira a lot. In one way, it had to be satisfying for Cassandra to not have that much attention directed at herself. She could simply take off the wig and dress and become a different person. Cassandra did, after all, look drastically different than the character she played. Cassandra is a tall, statuesque redhead who developed quite early. She came from Kansas, but became a Las Vegas showgirl in 1968 at the age of 17, the youngest ever at that time. From this time on, through the 1970s, she did a lot of dancing and modeling for men's magazines, but slowly tried to break into music and comedy. Everything she was doing at this time would later apply to Elvira. Fun fact, Cassandra had a small role as a showgirl in the James Bond movie Diamonds Are Forever. That's a cool movie anyway. If you haven't seen it, check it out. In 1979, she became a member of the Groundlings improv troupe in Los Angeles. A lot of talented people came from the Groundlings. It was there where she created a Valley Girl type of character that ultimately became a large part of the Elvira persona further down the road. Superstar fame was coming for Cassandra in a way that she couldn't have imagined. The year was 1981. 6 years earlier, in 1975, a man by the name of Larry Vincent had died. Vincent was locally famous in LA for playing Sinister Seymour, the host of a weekend horror show called Fright Night. On Fright Night, Seymour would bash on the low-budget horror movies they were showing. People liked this and they missed it. The producers wanted to bring the show back, but they decided on a female presenter. Mayla Nurmi, who played the scary but funny vampire character in the 1950s, was the first person considered for the project. She dropped out early on when the producers refused to hire Lola Falana to star as her vampire character. Yeah, none of that makes sense to me either. Cassandra Peterson auditioned for the show and won. The producers were wise in the way that they let her create the show's character. She and her best friend Robert Redding came up with a sexy, gothic-looking vampire chick. Strange thing though, it was never expressly stated that Elvira was a vampire. She just looked strange. Years later, in her first movie, it was revealed that Elvira came from a family of witches. That idea was explored again in her sitcom pilot, but more often than not, she's just Elvira. The white makeup that makes Elvira look pale was an idea lifted from the kabuki makeup used by Japanese performers, and it kind of gave her an exotic geisha girl look. Her unique hairstyle was taken from the hairstyle used by the girl group the Ronettes of the early 1960s. The dress is perhaps the most interesting part of Elvira's ensemble. Nobody ever saw a dress like that before, and not every woman could wear that dress with as much success. Before the taping of the first show, Mayla Nurmi, Vampira herself, sent a cease and desist letter to the producers. She claimed that Elvira was a ripoff of Vampira. Cassandra has always maintained that it isn't. The court agreed with Cassandra, and the fact that Elvira became so successful was always a point of contention with Nurmi. Seriously, besides the color of the black dress and hair, there isn't much the same between Vampira and Elvira. What I am about to say is not meant as a put-down, it's just fact. Vampira isn't as sexy as Elvira. She wasn't meant to be. She also didn't have the outrageous personality of Elvira. Vampira was a bit more bland, but that's what she was supposed to be. Vampira herself was based off Morticia Addams from the Charles Addams cartoons, long before the famous Addams Family series. Addams could have sued Nermi for that, because that was a closer resemblance. The idea of dark, scary-looking women, though, is a very old idea that predates Morticia Addams by quite a bit. The show was renamed from Fright Night to Movie Macabre. Although meant to be a local Los Angeles show, Movie Macabre quickly gained national coverage due to Elvira herself. This was a rather unique character no one had seen before. Although she looked odd, she wasn't scary by any means. Her personality was like a cross between a valley girl and a trucker. Elvira basically said anything she liked. She mocked the movies they played, and herself. Elvira made a lot of boob jokes. It wasn't long before Elvira was being talked about in magazines like Playboy and featured on shows like The Tonight Show. She quickly started making a lot of appearances as Elvira in a lot of TV shows and movies like The Fall Guy and Stroker Ace. This only became more of a thing as time went on. But more popular than any of that was Elvira's brand. She was in a ton of commercials for beer and other things. She was immortalized in all kinds of products like costumes, comic books, action figures, trading cards, all kinds. Elvira's popularity really peaked in 1988 when she got her first movie, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I loved this movie back then, and I love it now. It was funny, sexy, and it had a good story. For the first time ever, Elvira was given a backstory, and it was pretty cool. As we find out, Elvira didn't even know why she was like she was, until she learns of her family's past. Everybody I know who saw the movie liked it, but at the time it still flopped. Why would this even be? Especially when the character of Elvira was so popular. The distribution company for this film went out of business literally the day before the film's release. The movie was supposed to appear in over 2,500 theaters, but dropped to 500. Considering that, the movie actually did make pretty good money, it's just that not enough people were able to see it. Since that time, though, this movie has done well on home media and is considered a cult favorite. Believe it or not, even with that film's initial failure, Cassandra quickly sold a script for a sequel. What squelched it is the fact that Carolco Pictures went bankrupt. After that, a direct sequel to Mistress of the Dark would forever be mired in red tape. Although still a media darling, Elvira had a difficult time finding her own shows to star in. She filmed a pilot for a sitcom called The Elvira Show in 1993, but it was not picked up. This was actually an interesting show, and should have had a chance. She was going to have another movie called Elvira vs. the Vampire Women, but a contract dispute with Roger Corman stopped that from happening. In 2001, Elvira finally came out with her second movie, Elvira's Haunted Hills. This is a good movie, but absolutely unrelated to her previous film. She still couldn't make a direct sequel to Mistress of the Dark. The script for Haunted Hills was written in the late 1990s, but she couldn't get Hollywood to produce it after 3 years of trying. Cassandra and her husband, Mark Peterson, decided to finance it themselves. It had a few theatrical showings, but was released direct-to-video in 2002. To be honest, this didn't seem like a low-budget movie at all, and should have been shown in theaters on a larger scale. Even Elvira, at the end of the movie, remarks that she can't believe they could have afforded such a groovy special effect. Since then, Elvira has still been kicking around, but nothing major besides a couple of Scooby-Doo cartoon movies. She is one of the major women icons of the 1980s decade, and more woman than most men can handle. Elvira manages to be quirky and hot, a combination that's almost impossible to pull off, and easily qualifying her as Babe of the Day, Babe of the Day.